Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, our topic is distributed resource scheduler. Uh, what is uh, the benefits of DRS feature? So that's what we are going to discuss in today's lecture. As discussed, I don't have any slides today. We are going to directly start from the lab portion. The session is going to be a very short session. And it's a very interesting session. So make sure uh, you stay with us till the end of the session. So as you can see here, I have my lab here. This is our lab environment. We have a vCenter server. We have 3 ESXi hosts, and we have some virtual machines running on those 3 hosts. So what is the function of vSphere DRS feature? The first thing is initial placement of virtual machines. What does it mean? So, for example, we have uh, 3 ESXi host, ESXi1. Let's say we have ESXi2, we have ESXi3. These are our 3 ESXi hosts. And for example, we have 10 virtual machines, right? And all these virtual machines are powered off. So if you have to power on those virtual machines, as an administrator, we should know that which VM will be powered on which ESXi host. So if I give you a task that, hey, power on all the virtual machine on all these 3 ESXi hosts. So the important thing is that you distribute the workload equally among all the ESXi hosts. So that is called initial placement. Initial placement means when the virtual machines are powered off, and when you need to power on those virtual machine, it needs to be powered on any of these 3 ESXi hosts, right? We have to decide that. Let's say all the virtual machines are running, for example, right? So if all the virtual machines are running, right, and you have to distribute workload of these virtual machines. It is sometimes very difficult. If I give you a task that we have 3 hosts and we have 10 virtual machines, and if I ask you to distribute the workload, can you do that? Normally, what will you do? You will move 3 virtual machines here, let's say 3 virtual machines here, and 4 virtual machines here. For example, you have 4 virtual machines more, right? So what you are going to do, uh, you are going to add 1 virtual machine here, 2 here, let's say, and let's say 1 virtual machine here. So this is how you can distribute the workload. What if I ask you that, for example, we have 3 hosts and let's say we have 15 virtual machines. So what will you do? You will divide 15 by 3, which becomes 5. It means that based on your calculation, each ESXi host will have 5 virtual machines, right? So this is how we distribute workload. Am I right? Okay, I think we have some issue with the audio. Give me 1 second. Okay, who else has audio issue? I think Sajad would be having the same issue. So please connect your audio. Okay, perfect. Seems like you guys are here, Sajad and Hadia. Okay, let's continue. So today, the topic of uh, our session is vSphere Distributed Resource Scheduler. That's our feature. If you don't know about vSphere DRS feature, you can simply open a browser. You can write vSphere DRS and you can have an idea that DRS spreads the virtual machine workloads across vSphere host inside a cluster and monitors available resources for you, right? So that's the main function of vSphere DRS feature. Let me open this document. When you open this document, you can see here that VMware vSphere DRS is a feature included in the vSphere Enterprise Plus. This is the most important thing you need to know. And if you have a vSphere environment, and if you want to use a vSphere DRS feature, you need to have a vSphere Enterprise Plus license. It's an expensive feature, right? Uh, Maybe I'm not sure if I have some videos on my YouTube regarding the VMware licensing portion, but let me write here that we have different license editions. vSphere Essential Kit, vSphere Essentials Plus Kit, we have vSphere Standard, and we have vSphere Enterprise Plus license, which is the most expensive, and DRS is only available in vSphere Enterprise Plus. So if you have a VMware vSphere environment, right here, and you want to enable vSphere DRS feature, you need to have a vSphere Enterprise Plus licenses, right? So let me show you something. The first thing we need to understand the current license of ESXi host. So you can log into your vCenter server, and once you scroll down under system, you can see licensing. And here we are showing that this ESXi host has a vSphere 8 Enterprise Plus license. You can check the same for the other host, and you can check the same for this host as well. So as we can see here, we have 3 ESXi hosts, and all of them has a vSphere Enterprise Plus licenses, right? So let me open a Paint dashboard and I can show you here. So to enable vSphere DRS, the first thing we need to have is vSphere Enterprise Plus license. That is the first thing. This is the first requirement. The second requirement we need to have is a vSphere cluster. All the hosts must be in a cluster. What is cluster? Let me explain it. Let's say you have ES6i1, right? And for example, we have another ES6i, right? And let's say we have a third host as well. Each host has 4 cores CPU, Each host has 12 GB RAM, right? That is the requirement of each host. So when you create a cluster of these three hosts, right, it means that 12 multiplied by 3 is equal to 36 GB RAM. So total RAM is 36 GB RAM. So by creating a cluster, we can create a pool of resources. We can combine the physical resource of each ESXi host. That's the benefit of the cluster. So as you can see here, we have a vCenter server. You can simply write here on the data center, and here we can see an option called new cluster, and you can write a name, for example, KBIT cluster 01. Keep all the option as it is, and also uncheck this button. We are not going to enable DRS feature right now. We are not going to enable vSphere HA. We are not going to enable vSAN. We also are not going to discuss the life cycle management. So we have some features which you can only use if you have a cluster. So DRS feature, high availability feature. These are the features which are only available on cluster level. So to enable DRS feature, you need to have a cluster. So first, create a cluster like this. And when you click next, we can see we have a cluster created. The second step is drag and drop all the ESXi hosts to the cluster like this. So what I did, I just moved all my ESXi hosts to the cluster. So now all these three hosts are under this cluster. How many hosts we can have in a single cluster? We can have total 96 ESXi hosts in a cluster. And from summary tab, we can see we have total how much RAM? 24 GB RAM, because each ESXi host has 8 GB of RAM. You can also monitor like this. From the host tab, you can see how many ESXi hosts are a part of this cluster. So we have these three hosts connected here. If I click ESXi1 and if I go to VMs tab, I can see tiny Linux VM is running on ESXi1. I can see tiny Linux and Windows 10 VMs running on ESXi2, and I don't see any virtual machine running on ESXi3. So total we have 3 ESXi hosts and we have 3 virtual machines, right? But one of the ESXi host is free, but the rest of the 2 ESXi host has some workload. DRS is disabled by default, right? So if we have to distribute the workload, we will migrate the virtual machine manually. So the third requirement for vSphere DRS feature is vMotion enabled. What is vMotion? vMotion means to move a powered on virtual machines, right? So if you want to enable DRS feature, you need to have vMotion available. And we can confirm vMotion like this. If I click Windows 10 virtual machine, currently this virtual machine is running on which ESXi host? This Windows 10 VM is running on ESXi2. I can simply write and I can click migrate option and I can simply change the ESXi host and I can move it to ESXi3, and this is how you can move a powered on virtual machine from one host to another host. So this is how you can move virtual machine. We can also confirm it from here, right? So I think the migration is done. So it means that, right? So we have three hosts and each host has a single virtual machine running, right? That is the story. Okay. So I just moved the virtual machine. It means that vMotion is available. So if you have three hosts and three virtual machine, I think this is a normal thing. We can distribute the workload. What if you have 10 ESXi hosts and let's say you have 250 or maybe 220 virtual machines. And if I give you the task to distribute these 220 virtual machines among 10 ESXi hosts, can you do that? Is it possible? I know the one formula will be like this. You will open the calculator, right? And then you will write 220 divided by 10 is equal to 22. It means that each ESXi host will host 22 virtual machines. What if we have different workload virtual machines? Let's say one of the virtual machine has your database running. Let's say the other virtual machine has your web services running. So I think uh, this is also going to be a challenge for you. Maybe you are a mathematician or maybe you know statistic. You will do calculation and you will monitor the virtual machine performance, and based on those performance you will decide that a VM1 should be run on ESXi3, VM2 should be run on ESXi5. So I think this distribution is also going to be difficult for you, right? So DRS is a feature. Simply we can enable DRS feature on a cluster. Once we enable DRS feature, that is the responsibility of DRS. DRS will migrate virtual machine from one host to another host in order to balance the workload. So if I open the page here, so these are the feature, balanced capacity, right? The other option is reduce energy consumption. We have another feature called distributed power management, DPM, right? So this is also a very good feature. For example, you have 10 hosts and during night time, there is no heavy workload. So DPM and DRS feature will work together and they will change some of the host to the sleeping mode. They will put some host in the sleeping mode, right? For example, out of 10, 3 ESXi host will become in a sleeping mode and all the workload will be migrated to the seven ESXi host, right? So it means during night time, only 7 ESXi host means 7 servers are running, are powered on, and the remaining 3 servers are off during night time. So this way you can also save your energy or power consumption, right? So this is also another feature of DRS feature that it works with distributed power management, right? So DPM place host in a standby mode, and when demand is high, DPM powers on enough host to manage that demand and keep your services available. So let's say in the restaurant, we have 20 waiters, right? Working during daytime. I don't need 20 waiters. during night time. So during night time, maybe I need only 5, maybe midnight, I mean. So it means I can send the rest of the 15 waiters to home, and I can ask them that I will not give you any salary or any amount for the midnight or whatever you can plan, right? Okay. Initial workload placement. So the best option, the one of the other feature of DRS is initial placement. What is initial placement? When all the virtual machines are powered off and when you power on, DRS will recommend an ES6i host for that virtual machine, and DRS will power on and power on the virtual machine on that specific ES6i host. Now, I think I have a question from Mr. Murtaza. For a cluster, you mentioned that it is to create a pool of resources from. Okay, well, my query is ES6i should be installed on each machine to achieve so that. Okay, basically, Mr. Murtaza, in the production environment, right? Sorry, guys. So let's say we have Dell servers, right? So let's say you have a data center and you have these, uh, this is the server and you have 3 hardwares available. So you can combine these 3 hardwares by using a cluster feature. Let's say all the servers has ES6i installed. They are connected to vCenter server. You will log into vCenter server like this. And then you will add all the 3 hosts to the vCenter server. You will create a cluster, right? Once you create a cluster, you will move all the ES6i hosts to the cluster. And now you can see under summary tab, the total capacity of the cluster is this much. It means that all the physical resources, compute and memory, they are combined in a single resource pool, right? And the other benefit of the cluster is, what if you have 3 hosts with 12 GB RAM and I ask you to create a virtual machine with 16 GB of RAM? So without cluster, I think no ES6i host will be able to run that virtual machine because each ES6i host has 12 GB of RAM, right? So what we can do, we can create a cluster, we can combine, we can add these 3 hosts to the cluster, and now we have total of 36 GB RAM and we should be able to run a 16 GB virtual machine on top of the cluster, right? So the backend stuff and everything will be, it's not our responsibility. It will be done automatically. We just need to create a cluster and move the host. Any question regarding the initial placement of virtual machine? Okay, let me guide you. For example, you are giving an interview of VMware uh, position. And if the interviewer asks you that, hey, what is vSphere DRS? So you can simply answer that vSphere DRS is a distributed resource scheduler. It's a cluster level feature of VMware, right? And the function of DRS is to balance the workload of the virtual machines. So if you have 10 hosts and you have 220 virtual machines, when you enable DRS feature, DRS will distribute the workload. If all the virtual machines are powered off, right? So in that case, DRS will do the initial placement. DRS will decide where to run which virtual machine, where to power on that virtual machine. If all the virtual machines are running, so DRS will do migration based on performance. And how DRS decide this? It's because of the score, right? So let me show you how to enable vSphere DRS feature, and then we can discuss the rest of the option. As you can see here, we have ESXi1 and 2, 3. Let me create another virtual machine as well. For example, let me take a clone and let me create Windows 10-VM02. Click next. I think I need to select a host. I need to select a data store, and that's it. We have another virtual machines also. So how many virtual machine do we have? We have total 4 virtual machine, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have 3 ESXi host. So you can click the cluster and under configure tab, you can see vSphere DRS, which is by default turn off. You can click edit. Kindly keep your cameras off, please. Perfect. So vSphere DRS, it is disabled, right? So I can enable DRS feature. Once you click the enable tab, I can see automation level, right? What is automation level? By default, we have fully automated option. We have manual, we have partially automated, and we have fully automated option. Let me discuss each of these 3 options. Which 2 functions DRS perform? One is initial placement, right? And what is the other one? VM migration. So when you click manual, right? So it means that uh, both initial placement and virtual machine migration will be performed by us, but DRS will only give us recommendation. And let me show you practically. Let me keep this option manual, right? And let me click OK. And I'm going to power off all the virtual machine, right? I'm just going to power off all the virtual machine, right? So let's do that. So we have DRS, right? Feature enabled, but the automation level is manual. And if I'm going to power on this virtual machine, power on, now I'm getting recommendation from DRS. Based on vSphere DRS, this VM, Tiny Linux, needs to be power on ES6i2. This is the DRS recommendation, recommendation 1. Recommendation 2 is I can also power on this virtual machine on ES6i1, and I can also power on this one. So based on the calculation of vSphere DRS, I can power on Tiny Linux VM on any of the ES6i host, right? So let me click the recommendation one. And once I click OK, when I scroll down, I can see Tiny Linux VM is currently running on ES6i2. Let me power on this virtual machine. When I power on, okay, based on recommendation from the DRS feature, I need to power on this virtual machine on ES6i1. Let me power on the same virtual machine on ES6i2, right? I can do that. Now, Tiny Linux VM is also power on ES6i2. I can confirm from here as well. When you, okay, I think I have selected the two options. Okay, I have this Windows 10 virtual machine, which is currently on ES6i1. The VM is powered off. When I click this virtual machine and I click power on, so since we have vSphere DRS feature, the recommendation is ES6i1, but let me select ES6i3 for Windows 10 VM2 VM. And when I click OK, you can confirm here, right? When you refresh it, I think I need to wait for a while so that the settings can be applied. Any question, guys? ES6i2 has two virtual machines running, ES6i3 has two virtual machine running, and I don't show any virtual machine running here. What is these virtual machine? We will discuss this in upcoming sessions. Maybe when we have a session on vSphere high availability, that's going to be another topic, right, in my upcoming webinar. But today we are specifically focused on a feature called vSphere DRS feature. Any question? Let's go back to the configuration option, and next to automation level, the option is manual. When the option is manual, DRS generates both power on placement recommendation and migration recommendation for VMs. Recommendations need to be manually applied or ignored. But when I click partially automated, DRS automatically place VMs onto host at VM power on migration recommendation need to be manually applied or ignored. And when I click fully automated, it means that DRS automatically place VMs onto host at VM power on and virtual machine are automatically migrated. Let me select fully automated now, right? And since we can see here, ES6i1 does not have any virtual machine running. So from the summary monitor tab, when you scroll down, you can see the history of vSphere DRS, that what happens in the last couple of minutes and maybe hours, maybe days. You can see the time, you can see the date, you can see the actions performed by the DRS feature or from you. You can see recommendations here. Then you can also run recommendation. Okay, a question. How vSphere DRS decide which virtual machine has performance issue? And that is based on the VMDRS score. When I click VMDRS score, I can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4. These two virtual machines are healthy, but Windows 10 VM is not healthy. Windows 10 VM2 is also not healthy. So the score near to 0 means performance issue. So I think now after a minute or whatever the period time is, DRS will decide that let's move Windows 10 from one host to another host in order to get a better score, right? So this is the story. Let me refresh it. Now I can see all the virtual machine has 98, 98, 100, 100 score. And let me also see the history, and I can see the history. What happens actually on the backend? This is the recent activity. DRS migrate Windows 10 virtual machine from ES6i3 to ES6i1. And why this happens automatically? The reason, our DRS feature automation level is fully automated. So the next question, if you have been asked in the interview that what is the DRS automation? What does fully automated mean? So the answer should be DRS will recommend both initial placement and VM migration, and also DRS will take actions automatically. What happens in partially automated option? The initial placement will be recommended and the action will be performed by the DRS, but for the VM migration, we will only get recommendation from the DRS feature, and uh, the 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 action will be performed by us. Okay, I think it should be clear right now, right? So let me pause for a while. If you have any question, unmute yourself and ask me question so that I can answer your question. If there is no question, I can move to the next portion of today's topic, and which is also going to be the last uh, lab which we are going to perform right now. Okay, guys, any question? Mr. Michael, Mr. Hassan, Ilham, Ali, Mahmoudao. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Okay, Ali Rahman. No question? Okay, perfect. Awesome. Raise your hand if you know primary domain controller and additional domain controller. Come on, guys. I just want to check how many of you have uh, done the Microsoft System Administration training. Who knows primary? What is primary domain controller? What is additional domain controller? Just raise your hand or just yes or no. Leave the message on the chat box so that at least I have the idea. Okay, Adia doesn't know about primary and additional domain controller. No problem. Anyone else? Muzammil also doesn't know. Ali Rahman. Okay. Ilham, Hosti. Do you know what is additional and primary domain controller? It's like,
Yes, sir.
okay, you know, perfect. So let me explain it. Basically, primary domain controller means primary, right? And additional means backup. So let's say you have two virtual machines, right? And one is the primary domain controller and the other one is additional domain controller. This is VM1, right? This is the VM1 is a primary domain controller, right? Uh, so if I have to, let's say VM1 is running here. Is it a good practice that I also run the VM2, which is additional domain controller on the same host? Or should I keep it on the other host? Which practice is good? Same host or different host? What would be your decision? Different host. Yes, definitely. Why? Because the purpose of two domain controller is, right? If one VM is down, so that I have another host, another VM available. Yes, availability. So different host is a good option. Okay. Now let's assume. Let me rename this one. Let me see if I can rename this VM. Let me rename it. Let me write PDC. PDC. PDC means primary domain controller. Let me rename this one as well. ADC. So I have two virtual machine. One is my PDC and the other one is my primary. So there is a chances, right, that based on the DRS decision, maybe let's say we run DRS, and what does DRS uh, perform? PDC is running on ES6i1, ADC is running on ES6i2, Tiny Linux and 2 are running on ES6i3. This is also possibility. This is also possibility that both ADC and PDCs are running on ES6i3. Tiny Linux is running on ES6i1 and Tiny Linux 2 is running on ES6i3. So I think DRS is okay, but also it's not okay. I think you all are familiar with AI, right? Machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? You are familiar with these two terms, machine learning and AI. So machines are good, but if they are not performing the actual task which we want them to perform for us, I think then machines are bad. So DRS is a very good feature, but again, what if DRS place these two virtual machine on the same host? So what do you think? Is it a good practice? It is not a good practice. So for such type of virtual machine, we configure rules in DRS feature. And that rule is called anti-affinity rule. Anti-affinity rules mean that I want to keep these two virtual machines separate from each other, right? So let me check. Let me scroll down. PDC is currently running on which host? ES6i3, and ADC is running on ES6i1. Let me migrate. Okay, sorry, what happened to my mouse? I think I need to click action, migrate. I want to move this VM to ES6i3. So I just move ADC to ES6i3. Let's say this is not, the migration is not done from us. Let's say from the PDC, sorry, from the DRS feature. So on the cluster level, what we can do, we can scroll down and there is option called VM to host rules. You can click add. You can give it a name, domain controllers. And what do you want? Keep virtual machine separate virtual machines. And which two virtual machine you want to be separate? ADC and PDC. And then you can select them, both ADC and PDC. So we just created a rule that is called anti-affinity rule, right? And what we did, we give it a name, right? The type is separate virtual machines. I want these two virtual machine always be separate. I don't want them to be on the same host. So this is how we can train, or we can inform, or we can aware our vSphere DRS feature, right? And now let me click OK. That's it. So that's the rule we just created, right? So ES6i1 has ADC and ESXi2 has my PDC. Okay. I also want Tiny Linux and Tiny Linux to be separate. So I can also create another rule for both of these two virtual machines, right? So we can prepare such type of rules. Even we can create a rule for to keep both virtual machine on the same host, right? So this is how we can create rules. Any question? So if you want to understand more about, so you can write vSphere DRS affinity rules, and you can open a PDF document here, right? You can read this document for vSphere 8 since we are doing the labs on vSphere 8. We have VM to host affinity rule. What does it means? Let's say you have this virtual machine, VM1, right? And you want this virtual machine to always be on ESXi1. Reason? Maybe this virtual machine has an application which need a graphic card access and you only have a physical GPU available on this host only. So for such virtual machine, you can create a rule called VM to host affinity rule. It means that I want my VM1 to be always available on ES6i1. And let's create this rule. I'm showing a virtual machine. Let me delete the existing rule. So I can simply select the rule, I can delete it, and that's it. And let me create a rule for my PDC, right? Or maybe for Tiny Linux. Let me confirm. Tiny Linux VM is currently on ES6i2. I want this VM to be on my ES6i1 always, right? So I can click the cluster. I can go to VM to host rule, and here I can see VM to host groups. I can create a group. I will write GPU host. Which host has my GPU? So I will select the type as host and I will click add. Let's say ES6i1 or maybe, yes, okay, one. One has the GPU physical card available. And this is my host, right, which has a GPU host, right? Let me create another rule. Let's say 3D VM. This is the virtual machine. The Tiny Linux VM is the virtual machine which has my 3D enabled applications running, right? So I have a group. I just created a group of host and the group of the virtual machine. Now I can create a rule for both. So I can click add. I can write 3D or maybe graphic, right? Workload. I can select this option, VM to host, right? So I want my 3D VM on my ESXi this host, GPU host. And we have four types of rules available. Must run means must. If ESXi1 is not available, DRS is not going to power on that virtual machine. Should run means that let's say ESXi1 is not available, so that virtual machine can be run on ESXi2 and 3. But if one is available, then this VM is going to be always on the ESXi1. And same is the case for the must not run and should not run. So let me create must run. And when you click OK, right? First, let me show you. The tiny Linux VM is not here, but after some time you would see DRS will migrate that virtual machine tiny Linux, which is currently on ES6i3, right? So DRS will move this virtual machine from 3 to 1 because we have configured VM to host affinity rule. So I hope you understand today's topic. Basically, the agenda of today's topic was to discuss what is vSphere DRS feature. You can search for it like this. You can find a lab. You can review the features, right? These are the features. And I just showed you how you can enable DRS feature on a cluster, right? And how you can configure rules for DRS and all these things, right? I think we should wait for it for a while so that we can see the result. In the meantime, if you guys have any question, you can ask me because we are almost done with today's session. I'm going to upload this session on my YouTube channel. You can watch, and if you still have any question, you can reach out to me. I believe I have my information available here. So you can reach out to me on my email. You can follow the Facebook page. This is my YouTube channel, the Instagram. If you are the Instagram user, you can reach out to me with any question. So, and hopefully we should be able to answer your question. Okay, I think I need to run the RS uh, recommendation. Where is that? Run DRS now. We don't need to do this, right? No problem. But still, we are here to see the result. Can we confirm the rules? Have we configured the rules properly? Maybe it takes time. I don't know how much time, I could not recall, but this is how it works, right? So I'm going to save the recording.